By the middle of 1942, the war in the Pacific had shifted in a big way. The fierce fights at Guadalcanal became muddy nightmares. Later, in 1943, on Tarawa's coral reefs soaked in blood, and in 1944, among Saipan's sharp cliffs, Japanese soldiers, trained under the strict Senjinkun code to die rather than give up, faced a fate they never dreamed of: capture. For the Imperial Japanese Army, getting caught was worse than death. It stole a man's soul, cutting him off from his family, his country, and the Emperor's holy protection. He turned into an outsider, marked as a coward forever. Most of those who fell into American hands were just shells of soldiers, worn down by hunger, hit hard by malaria, or torn up by shrapnel. They staggered out of thick New Guinea jungles or strong bunkers in the Central Pacific, lifting their hands in a foggy surrender, some still holding rifles without bullets like useless keepsakes. Whispers passed through their lines: "The Americans will skin us alive, dig out our eyes, or hang us up as scary warnings." For months, propaganda movies and tough officer talks had carved the enemy into wild devils who loved causing horrible pain. Even American questioners were shocked. These weren't the wild fighters rushing into bullets. They were broken people, silent, while doctors fixed their cuts. Some tried hard to kill themselves, swallowing bits of glass or shell pieces in messed-up seppuku acts. Others pulled back from any touch, sure that an enemy's hand would ruin their spirit for good. But as hours turned into days, the solid myths started to break. A captured sailor, bandaged by the same Marine who shot at him just minutes ago, stared at the offered cigarette and thought, why show this kindness? In the rough holding areas of steamy Hawaii or dry Australian camps, the confusion just got stronger. They got white bread sandwiches, hot cups of coffee, and cans of fruit, normal food that made fun of their wormy rice mush. One prisoner of war stopped, his fork shaking because he thought it was poison, until the warm smell of fresh bread broke his doubt. He gobbled it up, tears mixing with the bits, his skinny body taking in 3,800 calories after long months on only 1,200. This wasn't meanness. It was a raw, confusing act of care. From these short stop places, a chosen few, top officers, submarine crew, and pilots, got ready for the tough trip across the Pacific, headed for deep questioning and long stays. They climbed aboard Liberty ships or fixed up troop carriers, their dark, salty holds watched by MPs but following Geneva rules. The ride lasted 2 or 3 weeks, with waves rolling like angry ghosts. Down below, prisoner of wars hung in hammocks next to each other, getting quick looks at the starry sky above. Food came hot when they could: big chunks of corned beef, smooth mashed potatoes, sweet peaches in syrup. And then, something unbelievable: a scoop of vanilla ice cream melting slow in the hot air. One Navy lieutenant said later in Ulrich Strauss's The Anguish of Surrender, 2003, "It was like cold fire on my tongue. I cried not from happiness, but because my emperor's soldiers went hungry while these enemies ate like gods." Ensign Kazuo Sakamaki, the war's first Japanese prisoner of war, thrown up on shore from his wrecked small submarine at Pearl Harbor, made it through that trip in chains, his mind like a storm. In his book, he told of the guards' quiet offers of water. "I cannot understand how you could return alive. The souls of the brave comrades who fought with you and died must be crying now over what you have done." No, that voice came from inside him, the biting shame from his home country. But the Americans gave him stake, let him loose for breaths of fresh air, and saw him not as a pest, but as another person. When the ships pulled into foggy docks in San Francisco, Seattle, or San Pedro, the prisoners walked slowly into checks, cleaning sprays that stung like bad memories, fingerprints marked like lasting stains. Names, ranks, and units got carefully written down by Nisei translators, kids of immigrants, building connections over the gap with perfect Japanese. Then came the iron tracks inland, guarded Pullman cars rumbling through evening farmlands, lights out for safety. A thick quiet wrapped the rooms. Prisoner of war sat stiff, eyes away, chanting Buddhist prayers or planning secret ways out. A hidden knife would be better than this half-dead life, one thought. But the guards, strong MPs with soft southern accents, flipped every idea on its head. As Midwest cold gripped the cars, Wool blankets went over shoulders without a word. At quick stops, lunch boxes passed around, rye bread holding ham, sour apples, chocolate bars in foil that softened in your hand. A few even asked softly through helpers, "Your family? The ocean by your home?" Moves like careful bridges over a deep pit. No drafted soldier had prepared for that kind of real human touch from enemies. Their final spots were wire-fenced spots across America's rich fields. Camp McCoy in Wisconsin grew to hold 3,000 in cold, lonely snow. Camps Huntsville and Kennedy in Texas baked under non-stop sun. Cleaned up and dressed in POW-marked clothes, they stepped into busy areas, dining halls full of talk, open spots for sumo matches or picked-up baseball games, health rooms packed with sulfur meds and real worry. Beds sank under new straw covers, wrapped in wool as cozy as old fireplaces. To guys from wet foxholes, it felt like too much. Steady electric lights, hot showers that scrubbed off the dirt of battle. On that first night, the quiet hit like a weight. No loud shelling, no officers' boot-kicking ribs, just the strange sound of hanging on. Some jumped up, fists tight against ghost enemies. Others cried into rough pillows, chased by thoughts of shamed family back home. They cry for a brave shadow. I keep going in shame. The beliefs cracked, piece by piece. Ice cream in the dining hall turned into a story, a secret weapon, one prisoner of war joked, breaking down tough walls better than any sword. Americans aren't beasts, a Tarawa survivor said looking back. They're human. And that shakes me the most. Even as the big war roared on, a quieter fight started behind those walls. Old tales bumping against hard facts, the warrior code turning back on itself. Pride wrestled with the draw of plenty, the holy idea of dying with honor giving in to the steady beat of life. For these guys, giving up wasn't the end. It sparked the first light of doubt. Inside the camps, the change started slow and quiet. On the first morning, many Japanese prisoners stood in straight military lines, waiting for beatings or hard labor. Instead, camp officers read out rules that surprised them. These rules followed the Geneva Convention and gave real rights, like protection from abuse and fair treatment. Prisoners got 3 hot meals a day, weekly doctor visits, and even 80 cents a day for work jobs. For men who thought they would be killed right away, this felt like a bad dream they could not wake from. The food hit them hardest. Meals came in clean dining halls with meat, fresh bread, potatoes, canned fruit, and strong coffee, about 3,800 calories each day. Back in the Japanese army, rations were just 200 calories of thin rice and fish, often gone bad. One prisoner from Tarawa later wrote in his diary, as told in Ulrich Strauss's book The Anguish of Surrender, 2003, that the food was better than what our officers ate in the jungle. Portions were big, and seconds were free. A few, still scared by propaganda stories, skipped meals for days, sure it was poisoned. But empty stomachs won out. In just 1 week, most gained back 10 to 20 pounds they lost in battle. At Camp McCoy in Wisconsin, the biggest camp for Japanese prisoner of wars holding up to 3,000 men, winter snow covered everything like a white blanket. This was new for soldiers from hot places like Okinawa or Kyushu. They stared out at Americans playing baseball on open fields and saw guards joking and smiling. The prisoners got warm coats, sturdy boots, and thick gloves from the Red Cross. It was not the torture they feared. It was kind treatment that left them mixed up. Some said in whispers that the Americans used niceness as a trick to break their minds, but younger ones started to loosen up, even crack small smiles during roll call. Work came next for those the camp trusted. About half the prisoners took jobs on nearby farms, picking corn, chopping wood, or fixing fences. Local farmers waved hello and shared hot coffee or extra apples. Guards watched close but acted more like bosses than jailers. In rural spots around McCoy, curious Americans tried talking with signs or simple words. One Wisconsin farmer remembered in a 1945 newspaper story how a Japanese prisoner of war bowed low after getting a ham sandwich and said in shaky English, "Thank you, American friend." The pay let prisoners buy soap, candy, or stamps from the camp store. Later, camps added fun and learning under Geneva rules. The YMCA brought books, balls for sports and paper for drawing. At Camp Huntsville in Texas, home to re-education talks on democracy, there was a library with over 500 English books, word books, and U.S. history pages donated by locals. Prisoners made music bands, building guitars from old crates. Some drew pictures of cherry blossoms back home or kept secret journals about camp life. For guys raised to see Americans as cruel beasts, these normal days, kicking a soccer ball or reading a story, felt like a puzzle they could not solve. The mind fights never stopped. Older officers and brainwashed troops saw any help as a shame. They kept strict rules, making others bow to them and turn down gifts. But that power cracked over time. Younger prisoners, seeing no quick death, started lessons in English or watched how Americans lived. A few traded Japanese words for cigarettes or extra fruit with guards. By 1945, about 60% of Japanese prisoner of wars told interrogators they saw U.S. ways as better than Japan's harsh army life, according to declassified reports. In the summer of 1944, as bad news hit Japan, like losses at Saipan, the Philippines, and later Iwo Jima, tension built in the camps. Prisoners got short radio news in Japanese from BBC broadcasts. Some cried alone over friends who died charging into guns. Guilt hit hard for living while others fell, but the fair care made them question everything. If America is the devil, one Saipan Japanese prisoner of war scratched in his diary, found after the war, why do they feed and heal us like this better than our own leaders? The biggest eye-opener was American ways of life. Camp bosses showed movies, not just war films but everyday ones about families at dinner, women in factories building planes, or kids in school playgrounds. These clips smashed the iron soldier image from Japanese schools. Prisoners saw free people, not weak slaves under bombs like propaganda claimed. As months dragged on, many stopped feeling like just fighters. They planted small gardens with camp seeds, read novels under lamps, or wrote letters to chaplains about lost homes. Some sketched Mount Fuji, others helped translators with questions, driven more by wonder than sellout. Stay longer and it sank in. Capture did not kill their human side, it brought it back, stronger than foxhole fear. By late 1944, U.S. guards praised the Japanese discipline. They followed orders fast, kept barracks spotless with daily sweeps, and caused almost no fights, unlike some German-Japanese prisoner-of-war groups. Doctors saw health jump, malaria cases dropped 80% with quinine pills, and moods lifted. Suicide tries fell from 1 a week early on to near 0 by 1945. Walls stayed high, words, ways, and capture shame, but deep down, a change brewed. Foes turned back into men, one shared meal at a time. By early 1945, the U.S. government saw Japanese prisoners not just as enemies, but as tools for rebuilding after the war. The Office of War Information and the War Department started re-education programs in key camps like Huntsville and Kennedy in Texas. These were top-secret efforts approved in July 1945 to teach about democracy and undo the strict military brainwashing from pre-war Japan. Only about 200 cooperative prisoner of wars, mostly younger ones who had already opened up, joined at Huntsville, run by a special prisoner of war processing company. Classes were optional, but interest built fast. Teachers, often Nisei Japanese Americans who spoke both languages well, covered U.S. history, basic government ideas, and even books like Mark Twain stories. They passed around Life magazines with photos of busy American cities and showed newsreels of free speeches and town hall talks. For men raised on heavy censorship and emperor worship, this free flow of ideas felt like a shock. Some sat with crossed arms, full of doubt. Others pulled out notebooks and jotted down thoughts, asking questions about voting or free press. Cultural swaps came next and helped bridge the gap. At Huntsville, camp bands mixed Japanese folk tunes like Sakura with American hits such as Yankee Doodle. Bilingual newsletters, like one called Doko Maid from nearby McCoy, ran essays in English and Japanese debating loyalty to the emperor versus peace. A handful of prisoner of wars wrote short pieces saying sorry for Japan's attacks on Pearl Harbor and China, but hardliners called them turncoats. This split mirrored Japan's own coming changes, from blind obedience to facing the past. Even with these mind battles, Everyday routines stayed steady and peaceful. Work details kept going on Texas farms for cotton picking or Wisconsin lumber yards near McCoy, where prisoner of wars cut logs for $0.80 a day under Geneva rules. The Red Cross checked camps often and gave high marks, better than many, for clean food and fair play. Reports from 1945 noted healthy men, weighing 20–30 pounds more than on arrival, who played baseball games against guards, practiced inkbrush writing, or carved wooden toys as gifts for local kids. This stood out sharp against horror stories from German or Japanese camps, where death rates hit 27–40% from starvation and beatings. But the heavy load of shame hung on, especially for older troops. Japanese ways, full of honor and self-sacrifice, treated captives as walking dead. Families held fake funerals back home. Mail from Japan came seldom, chopped up by censors, and stayed stiff and short. Some prisoner of wars told camp chaplains in private that going back scared them more than the wire fences. Here, at least, they could drop the warrior mask and just try to get through one more day without judgment. The war's end on August 15, 1945, VJ Day, hit like a wave of mixed feelings. Word spread fast via shortwave radios tuned to BBC Japanese broadcasts. Silence dropped over the yards. Some knelt in prayer facing east toward the Emperor's palace. Others froze, staring at the dirt, while a few crumpled in sobs, mumbling that the unbeatable empire had cracked. In the weeks after, US teams got ready for sending them home. Prisoner of wars got fresh uniforms, shots against diseases like typhoid, and packed bags with books or drawings they made. The trip back over the Pacific mixed up feelings like a storm: gladness to see land again, fear of what folks would say, guilt over lost buddies, and a quiet ease. Ships like the USS General Stewart carried groups of 500–1,000 in 2 to 3 weeks, with hot meals and open decks for thinking. Many stood at rails, eyes on the waves, replaying camp life that flipped their old hate. Landing in Japan, bombed flat with rubble everywhere, they got no hero welcomes, just cold stares as living ghosts. Families who mourned them as dead now turned away in disgrace. Jobs shut doors tight, and some hid their stories for 40 years or more. Out of 5,000 US-held Japanese prisoner of wars, most shipped out by October 1945, but a few from re-education stayed extra months to help US teams. In the end, a small number spoke up for making peace, sharing with kids how Americans gave mercy instead of the torture they braced for. Looking back, experts point out these US camps had one of the lowest death rates for any WTO enemy prisoners, just 0.1%, or about 5 men from illness early on, way below the 1% for Germans here, or the nightmare 40% for Allies in Japanese hands. The twist cuts deep. Locked up, not fighting, is where many Japanese troops found back their sense of worth as people. Their tale twists as one of Witutu's wildest surprises, a time when plain kindness cracked open locked minds, and fighters trained for glorious death learned the quiet strength of just staying alive in calm. Web pages,